How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Pei, Daf 85 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, two Mishnayos today. The first one focuses on growing grain from Menachos. Kind of an interesting, I'm not sure how to describe it. Interesting, technical. Honestly, it's hard to know exactly what it concludes. It's a little bit of a funny kind of thing. Yeah, we're going to jump right into that. And then the second Mishnah talks about the best oils for the temple. So, yeah, what are the best grains? What are the best oils? How to grow? Things like that. So, it's going to be an interesting daf. Friends, let's jump in. Friends, we begin on Daf Pei, Daf 85, Amud Aleph, at the Mishnah about 5 or 10 lines into the daf. Daf Pei, Amud Aleph says, the Mishnah Mevin, Lo mi beis hazvalim, we do not bring grains. Rashi says we're talking about for the Omer v'shtei alechem. Okay, I imagine it could be talking about. Okay, so Tosfos Taka. 1 second. Okay, so Tosfos seems to say that it's talking Taka about all menachos. I think the Rambam seems to be understanding it the same way. Anyways. So it says the Mishnah, Ein Mevin Lo mi beis hazvalim. So we don't bring these grains from beis hazvalim. Beis hazvalim is a field that needs to be fertilized. And the concern is that if it's not properly fertilized, well then the quality of the yield will be inferior. Lo mi beis hashlachim, nor from a field that must be irrigated for a similar reason, that the quality may not be as good. Lo mi beis ha'ilon, and not from a field that has trees growing in it, because the trees are going to be hogging the water, and we need the water going to the grain. V'im evi kasher. Now, if, however, the grains did come from a beis hazvalim, a beis hashlachim, or a beis ha'ilon, they are nonetheless kasher. Ketzadu oset. Now, how are you supposed to plow and sow? Sow means to put seeds in the ground, I think. How are you supposed to plow and sow the field? Okay, so this is tricky. It's tricky because it's unclear what exactly it's talking about. I'll explain it to you how I understood it. It's a little bit confusing. Well, no, it's not really confusing. It's just confusing how all of a sudden just in the middle, it just kind of, I don't know, maybe I just don't understand. But I feel like all along we're explaining this whole plowing thing one way, and then there's a switcheroo at the end, which is a little weird. But I'm going to explain it how I understand it. Maybe if I was a farmer, I'd be able to explain it better, but I'm just going to explain it as I understand it. How's that? So, Ketzadu Oses, so how are you supposed to plow and sow the field? Nara Shana Rishona. So, this seems to be talking about, near is a type of plowing. And I think near refers to a plowing to get rid of the weeds. So, this wouldn't be a plow that apparently, right before you sow, right before you plant, you'll do a plow to kind of, soften up the ground. But now that would be in the winter. So now I've been working with, right now it's winter, it's kind of spring now, but winter 2026, right? Now the previous summer was the summer of 2025. The summer before that was the summer of 2024. So now my understanding is that basically in the summer of 2024, they would have plowed the field. The goal, the purpose of plowing the field in the summer of 2024 would be to break up any weeds, so that when you sow in the winter of 2025, right, that winter, if you didn't plow in the summer, so then there might be thorns and things and weeds that grow because the roots were there. So you plow in the summer in order to break up those roots, so that when you sow in the winter, all you have is what you want. All you have are the seeds that you've sown. And anything else would have already been broken up. And again, you're going to also plow right before you sow as well. So, Ketzuro says, so Shana Rishona, so in the summer of 2024, Nara Shana Rishona, he'll plow it in the summer to break up the weeds. Uva Shnia, so now we're talking about, so the question is what exactly this means. So let's say for now it means that this is talking about winter 2025 Zora. And then in the winter 2025, which is basically the next, meaning if you're plowing in the summer of 2024, the next time to sow would be winter of 2025. But we're talking about the next year, so sowing in winter 2026, which is basically now. So you would then plow, and then immediately sow in the winter of 2026. And that would be Kodem le Pesach Shivim Yom, 70 days before Pesach. So like the beginning of Shvat. Which would be, right? Yeah, it would be like January time or so. Vihu ose solis meruba, and if you plow and sow correctly, you'll have a great yield. It will make lots of fine flour. Kate said, Bodek HaGizber. How does the temple treasurer check flour? I think that there was I think people would often, if you bring like a Korban Mincha, you would buy flour, I think, from the temple treasury. So when the treasury was kind of receiving flour, how would the treasurer check the flour to make sure that it was grade A? Machnis yada l'sochen, he would put his hand into the flour, ala ba'avak, if dust came up. If flour dust came up, psula, it is possible adshe yinafena, until he sieves it. Okay, so basically we learned about it the other day, right? Maybe a week or two ago, we had a Mishnah that talked about like 13 or 12 or 11 different sieves that they had in the Beis HaMikdash, right? Some of the sieves were fine sieves, some of the sieves were coarse sieves. And basically they would start, I don't remember if they started with a fine sieve, I think maybe they started with a fine sieve, right? So they would start with a fine sieve, and what that would do is all of the really, really fine dust would come through the sieve. And what you would be left with is basically whatever was left in the sieve, on top of the sieve, would make it through to the next round. And then you would use the really, really coarse sieve, and whatever remained in the sieve this time would be the bad stuff, the coarse stuff, and that would be thrown out. Everything that made it through the sieve is what you want to keep. And then you'll put it through the second to thinnest. And whatever makes it through is too thin. Whatever remains makes it on to the next round, until finally you kind of meet in the middle at like you'll do like 1, 13, 2, 12, 3, 11, etc. And I think you'll land at 7, and like whatever makes it through number 7 is basically what you want. Anyways, so if the gizber puts his hand into the wheat and there's this very fine dust, that means that it was not properly sifted. So he says, okay, sift it again until all of that dust is out. The imislia psula. Now, if the flour or possibly the wheat, we're going to learn about this in the Gemara, if it has worms in it, that's a problem. Says the Gemara, Kate said ose nora shana rishona. So the Mishnah had said that in summer 2024 you plow to unweed, to break up the weeds. Ibari lahu, they asked a question. Heiki ka'amr, what exactly is it saying? Is it saying nora shana rishona, that in summer 2024 you plow to break up any roots and weeds? Vishniya, and also in summer 2025, right? So summer 2024 and summer 2025, Nara, you once again plow in order to break up any stuff. And then winter 2026, Vizora, you would do one final plow and sow. Odim, or perhaps Nara Shana Rishona, or maybe it's saying that in summer 2024 you plow in order to break up weeds. Vishniya, and then winter 2026, Zora, you plow and seed and sow, but you wouldn't have done anything in summer of 2025. What do you say, friends? Below Nara, without having plowed in the summer. Toshma, come in here. Desanya, we're learning a Braise. Amareb Yossi, says Reb Yossi, Af chite krozim, the Kfar Achim, the wheat of Krazim and Kfar Achim, ilmale smuchis liYerushalayim, if only they were close to Jerusalem, hayimavin man, we would be able to use them for, I guess if we're talking about wheat, so I guess the shtei alechem, or maybe even menachos. Lefi she'ein mevinas omer elemin sados mudramus, because when we're looking for flour, we're looking for flowers from fields that are on like the southern slope of the mountain. Let's go weiter. And I think that the Karziyim and the Kfar Achim, I think, fit that criteria, just that they are not close enough to Jerusalem. Menunaros lechach, and that are specifically plowed with the intention of being used for flour in the temple. The reason being, why the southern slope? Because particularly in the winter, the sun spends a lot of time in the southern part of the sky. It rises in the east, in the southeastern part of the sky, and then makes its way over to the southwestern part of the sky over the course of the day, but it's spending kind of the whole day going from east to west along the like a southern kind of trajectory, and therefore we want the field to be on a southern slope so that it soaks up the sunlight. Now, how should you plow and sow your field? Nara Shana Rishona, plow in summer 2024. Vishnia Choresh Vishona, and in summer 2025, do it again. Plow a second time in summer 2025. Vizora Kodem the Pesach Shivim Yom, and then plow a third time and immediately sow the field 70 days before Pesach. Kedei shetehei smucha lechama, so that by the time the grain starts growing and popping out and kind of growing, it will be Pesach time, and there'll be sort of the days getting longer, and there'll be lots and lots of abundant sunlight. Therefore, sow 70 days before Passover. V'ose kone zeres v'shiboles zartaim, and if you do this, well then the reed of the grain will be a zeres, which is half an amma, v'shiboles, and the ear of the grain will be 2.5 ammas, i.e. 1 amma. I have a slide here, a little slide of a stalk of grain, just in case anybody needs a refresher. So the white arrow is pointing to the stalk, to like the stalk thingy, and the blue arrow is pointing to the ear. So if you follow what we're saying with the plowing and the sowing and stuff, you'll have good gewaldige grain that will have stalk that is a half an amma and a ear that is a full amma. Gewaldig. V'kotzer, and then you harvest the grain, v'uma'amr, and you collect it all together, v'dosh, and thresh it, v'zora, and winnow it, uvorer, and select it, v'tochen, and grind it, umirakid, and sift it. Umevi eitzel gizber, and then it's brought to the gizber, the temple treasurer, v'gizber machnes yodah l'socha, and the gizber sticks his hand into the flour. Im also ba'avok, if flour dust comes up on his hand, omer lo chazor v'napei unpei osa, he says, go back and sift it better. Shnia, go back and sift it another time better. Mishum Reb Nasan Amru, they said from Reb Nasan, Gizber sachyodo shemen umachnis l'socha ad shemayla kol avka. Reb Nasan says that the gizber would first cover his hand in oil. The oil would attract the dust better, again to test to see if it's too dusty, the flour. Katani miyas, what did we teach? Choresh v'shona. In the brisa, what did we see? We saw choresh v'shona. We saw that you plow in the summer of 2024 and nachamo again in the summer of 2025. So says the Gemara, wait, but v'letaimich masisin lo katani shone. 1 second. Our Mishnah did not say to do it again. Brisa katani shone. The Brisa says you do it again. But so meaning, why are you so sure that the Brisa is explaining the Mishnah and not that the Brisa argues on the Mishnah? Maybe our Mishnah says that you don't plow again in summer 2025, and the Brisa is saying that you do plow again in summer 2025. Maybe they simply argue on each other, and we should probably prefer our Mishnah over the Brisa. Lokasha, not a problem. Kan ba'avuda, kan b'she'ena avuda. They're talking about two different types of field. A new field, a field that you're trying to get up and running and ready for its first sowing, so it requires more plowing. So that's what the Brisa is talking about. The Brisa is talking about a new field. So in 2024, you're going to plow it in the summer to rip up whatever needs to be ripped up, and you're going to do that Nachamal in summer 2025, and then you will plow a third time and sow in summer 2020, in winter 2026. However, the Mishnah is talking about a field that's already been worked before. So in that case, you would plow in summer 2024. You don't need to repeat in summer 2025, and you would plow and then immediately sow in the winter of 2026. Ma'avela, how do we pass? So now here's where the switcheroo comes. As I understand it. Tashma Kamir, Desani, we're learning about Nar Chetzia, Vizor Chetzia, Nar Chetzia, Vizor Chetzia. Okay, so what happens is, if I understand correctly, in winter 2025, you plow the whole field, and we're going to talk about two halves of the field: Reuven the field and Shimon the field. Right? Reuven the half field, Shimon the half field. So in winter 2025, you plow the whole field, and you immediately then sow Reuven the half field, and in Shimon the half field you leave fallow. And then in winter 2026, a year later, you're going to once again plow the field, and this time you're going to leave Reuven the half field fallow, and you're going to sow Shimon the half field. So kind of, I don't know. I don't know why the switcheroo. Maybe I don't actually understand it properly, but my understanding is, the way I do understand it, is that actually forget about any of the summer plowings. I think we're just going to, basically what you want to do is basically, so the Reuven the half field that you're sowing in winter 2025, you're not going to be able to use for the Omer because you need to have that second plow. But in terms of the question that we asked earlier, well, the Omer or the Shtei Lechem, whatever, the Korbanos, the question that we asked earlier, do you plow once and then plow a second time and then plow a third time in seed, or do you just plow once and then plow a second time in seed? It's that. It's like our Mishnah says, that you would plow once in winter 2025, plow the whole field. You would sow Reuven the half a field, but that would not be usable in the Beis Hamikdash. You would leave Shimon the half field fallow. The next year, in winter 2026, right? The last time was winter 2025. Now winter 2026. Once again, you're going to plow the whole field. This time, you're going to leave Reuven the half field fallow, and you're going to sow Shimon the half field. And this time, the yield of Shimon the half field will be able to be used in the holy temple. So again, Desanya, Nar Chetzia, Vizor Chetzia, plow essentially the whole field, but leave half of it in its plowed state, fallow, and then the other half will be sown. Nar Chetzia, Vizor Chetzia, and then the next year you just swap. Do the same, right? Half and half, but switch halves. Omer Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Ein Mevina Sa Omer, Ela Min Asados Mudramus Sheberetz Yisrael, says Rabbi Yochanan, like we said earlier, that the Omer is only brought from fields that are south-facing, that are on like a southern slope of the mountain in Eretz Yisrael, so that they can maximize sunlight. Sheboen Chama Zeirachas Umein Chama Shikas, because in there the sun shines and sets from there, meaning it's basically the whole time that it's out, it is shining on the southern slopes. Tanam Yochi, we also learn in a brisa like this, Abashol Omer says, Abashol Omer Ayabat mi bikas base makla, that the Omer would come from bikas base makla, kivaz gimel sayin, and bikas base makla was a field that held 3 sa'as of grain, which was perfect because that's exactly the amount that we need for the Omer. Gimel sayin Aysa, v'sade mudremes Aysa, and it was south facing, the southern slope of the mountain. Uva chama zerachas, and the sun shines on it, umena chama shakas, and it shines all the way until it is going to set. Nor chetzia v'zor chetzia, nor chetzia v'zor chetzia, you plow half and sow half, and then the next year you also plow half, right? You plow the other half and sow the other half. Rav Chilkir bar Tuvi avale karna da'ara. Rav Chilkir bar Tuvi at a corner of a land, that nor chetzia v'zor chetzia, that he plowed half and sowed half. Nar Chesed Chazar Chesed, and the next year he switched. The Avda al Chad Trey, and it was such a success that it was a double yield. Mizabelu L'chite L'smida, and he not only was able to sell them, but sell them for like grade A, finest flour. So it really worked wonders. So where did we land? I don't know, it's a little bit confusing. Where we kind of landed in the Gemara, the way I understood it, was basically, okay, so what a Mishnah is saying is that you'd basically plow in January 2020 for use in the Beis Hamikdash. You would plow in January 2025, plow again in January, right, in winter 2025, and then plow again in winter, again. Plow for the first time in winter 2025, plow again winter 2026, and then immediately sow, and then what is harvested would be able to use in the temple. The Rambam, however, I think seems to say that would, however, specifically be for a field that has already been worked. But I think he says that a field that has not been worked, I think the Rambam says you are going to want to get another plowing in. But anyways, I didn't see, that's not obvious to me from the Gemara. So a little bit of a tricky technical thing. Says the Gemara v'misliya psula. Okay, so the Mishnah had said that if there are worms, pasul. Tana Rabban, and the rabbis thought, soles she'esliya, that if flour got wormy, ruba, if most of the flour got wormy, psula. V'chitin she'esliu ruban. Now, wheat berries that became wormy, most of them, psulas. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, birov chita or birov sa'a. Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to know, are we talking about the majority of each individual berry became wormy, or is it that the majority of the berries were wormy? Teku, it's a tie. By Rava says, Kedishon maushi lokalein. If a person was makdish wormy flour, would you get makis? Mishum bal mum, right? Because by bal mum you'd be over on a lav. The pasuk says, Kol asher bo mum lo takrivu ki lo l'ratzon yeh lochem. Right? There's a lav against setting about against being makdish bal mum. Excuse me. Let me get some water. So the question is, if you're makdish flat wormy flour, would that be like being makdish bal mum? Kevin the pasul kibal mum dami. Do we say that since the flour is pasul, it's like an animal that has a mum, and you'd be over on the lav and you get makis? Or dilma ain bal mum el bebeim. Or maybe a bal mum though. A mum is specifically an animal type, an animal thing. Teku, it's a tie. And also we learn in a Mishnah Masechta Midos called eitz shenimsa bo tolas pasul. Any wood for the mizbeach that has worms in it, pasul legab mizbeach, you can't use it on the mizbeach. Lach, that's only when the wood is moist. About yavish, if the wood is dried out, goro, you could just scrape off the worms, the kosher, and it is kosher. Just remove the worms if the wood is dry. But Rava wants to know ikdisho mahu. And Tosfos points out that this is according to Rebbe, who says that, right, that you can offer, that we can treat the wood like a carbon, like an offering. So if you designate wormy wood, Ma'aseh Yilaka Olav, would you get makis for designating wormy wood? Mishum Baal Mum, like being makdish Baal Mum. Came the pasul to Baal Mum dummy. Do we say that since the wood is pasul, so it's like you designated a Baal Mum and you should get makis? Or Dilma in Baal Mum el bebehema, maybe Baal Mum is dafka for animals. Teku, it's a tie. Friends, that was the first section of today's daf, the first Mishnah, and the first section of today's daf, talking about growing grain for Menachos. Now we move on to the next Mishnah of today's daf, discussing the best oil for the temple. Says the Mishnah, Tkaya alpha l'shemen. Tkaya, best olive oil. Abishol Omer says, Abishol, Shniela, the runner-up, Regev be'ever Yarden. That's the runner-up. Kol arotzos hayuksheros. Now, you could technically use olive oil from any of the places, probably in Eretz Yisrael, but I don't know. Ela mikan hayu mivin, but they would, but priority would go to Tekoa or Regev Be'ever Yarden, because that was the best. In Mivin lo mi beis hazvalim, we don't bring olive oil from fertilized fields, v'lo beis hashlachim, or irrigated fields, like we said earlier, v'lo ma shenizo b'neim, or from orchards that have wheat growing in them, because the grains are going to be hogging up some of the water. V'im hevi kosher, but if you did bring olive oil from a orchard that is fertilized or irrigated, or with wheat, with grain planted there, it's kasher. And mevin anpikaton. We don't bring anpikaton. We're going to explain what that is later on. V'mevi kosher. If you brought it, kosher. And mevin min gargarin shenoshu b'mayim. If you take olives and you soak them in water, you can't then bring oil from those olives, because it's going to extract some of the oil. V'lo min. I think that's why, or whatever it is, the oil won't be good from. What does Rashi say? Shamay mekalklin es hashemen. The water messes up the oil. V'lo min hakvashim, nor can you bring oil from pickled olives. V'lo min hashlukim, or from boiled olives. V'maybe pasul. If you did, pasul. Says the Gemara, Vayishlach Yoav Tkoya vayikach misham isha chachama. The Navi describes in Sefer Shmuel Bet that after Avshalom killed Amnon for being me'anes his sister Tamar, so that was a very bad time in the household of King David. His son Amnon was dead. Avshalom then ran away for 3 years, and David HaMelech was very distraught about the whole thing. Not only did he lose Amnon, Avshalom is gone, he's away, and Yoav wanted to bring back Avshalom so that King David should be happy, and he came up with a whole scheme that involved a very smart lady from Tkoya. Right? The pasuk says, "Vayishlach Yoav Tkoya," that Yoav sent to Tkoya, "Vayikach misham isha chacham," and he brought from there a wise woman in order to scheme with her so that King David would agree to bring back Avshalom. My Shnat Tkoya, why, how come when he was searching for a smart woman, he searched in Tkoya? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, mitoch sheregilin b'shemen zayis chachma mitzuyin bohen. The answer is because since they consume a lot of olive oil, they are very wise for that reason. Because what does Rashi say? Shemen zayis mifakeach es halev. Because olive oil makes the heart smart. It says about Asher that he dips his foot in olive oil. This is the portion of Asher in the northwest of Eretz Yisrael. Mamish, like the north, the Galil, the northwest, where all the Hezbollah bombs and rockets and drones, you name it, are wreaking havoc. That it draws oil like a spring. Amru, they said, Pamachas, one time, one time the people of Ludkia, they needed oil. Minu loin polmustus echad, so they appointed for themselves a certain polmustus, certain agent. He was not a yid. Amru, and they said to him, Lech vehave lanu shemen b'mei ribo. Here is 1 million manas. That's a lot of manas, right? We usually talk about like 1,000 zuz being a lot. This was 1,000,000. 1,000 zuz is 10 manas. This is 1,000,000 manas. They wanted a lot. A mana is 100 zuz. So that's 100 million zuz. That's a lot of zuzes. So they wanted a lot of oil. So halach Yerushalayim. So this fellow went to Jerusalem. Amrullah, they said to him, Lech Letzur, go to Tyre. Tyre is a place that the Israeli Air Force, I think, is operating in quite a bit. Which means that this is a place that has been hijacked by Hezbollah and by proxy Iran. Right there on our border in Tyre. Amrullah, Lech Litzur. So in Jerusalem they said, go to Tyre. I guess Hezbollah was not there at the time. Halach Litzur, so he went to Tyre. Amalo, they said to him, Lech L'Gush Chalav, go to Gush Chalav, which is in the portion of Asher. Halach L'Gush Chalav, so he goes to Gush Chalav. Amalo, they said to him, Lech Eitzel Ploni, go to so-and-so, L'Sod Alaz, to such and such a field. Umitzo, and this agent goes to so-and-so in his field. Let's call him Osher. Let's call him Osher. Osher, the olive farmer in Gush Chalav. We're going to call him Osher. And this agent, what should we call the agent? Bob. And Bob, the agent, finds Osher, and Osher is working his field. He's hoeing under his tree, and Bob is feeling a little bit unimpressed. I mean, Bob is coming to buy 100 million zuzes worth of oil. He's hoping to find kind of a major olive oil operation here. He's going to the portion of Osher, known for its olive oil. This is the guy, simple guy, Reb Osher, hoeing under an olive tree. And Bob says, Amilo, yesh lecha shemen b'mei ribo? Do you have 100 million zuzes worth of oil? Shani tzarich. I'm looking for 100 million zuzes worth of oil. Can you accommodate that? Amilo hamten li at shesai melachti. And Reb Osher says, please just wait for me until I'm done working. Himten at shesai melachto. Okay, so Bob waited until Reb Osher finished hoeing and doing his work. Lach shesai melachto. After Reb Osher finished working, Hifshil Kileb Lachoriv, he took his tools and threw them over his shoulder. And on his way home, he was removing stones from the path. Not exactly what you would expect from an olive oil magnate who you were about to do 100 million zuz deal with. Amarlo, and Bob says to himself, so Bob says to Reb Osher again, he says, Yesh l'chashemen b'mei ribo? Like, you have 100 million zuz worth of oil? Right? 1 million manas worth of oil? And kumeduma ani sheschok sachaku b'Yehudim, and Bob is starting to think that maybe the Yidden are playing games with him. He's looking for 1 million manas worth of oil, and they're sending him to Reb Osher, when you saw him, he was hoeing under a tree. Now he's cleaning up the path on his way home. Came Shagir Le'iro. However, once they got to Reb Osher's city and to his house, all of a sudden, things started to change. Hatziulo Shivchoso, his maidservant, took out to Reb Osher. Kum Kimum, warm water, Shelchamin, a pot of warm water, V'rochaz Boyod V'raglav, and he washed his hands and his feet. Hotzilo Seifel Shalzov, and his maidservant brings out to him, to Reb Osher, a pitcher of gold, Milei Shemen, with oil, filled with oil, V'tovel Bo, Yod V'raglav, and he dipped in the oil his hands and his feet, L'kai Mashinemer, like the Pasuk says, V'tovel B'Shemen Raglo, that he dips his feet in oil. Lachash Ochlu V'Shasus, then Reb Osher and Bob, they had a business meeting. They had a business dinner together, and they were talking business. And they said, "Yeah, okay. So what did we say? 1 million manas worth of olive oil, no problem. Madad lo shemen b'mei ribo." And Reb Osher measured out for Reb Bob 1 million manas worth of olive oil. And Reb Osher says, "Okay, here's 1 million manas worth of olive oil. Do you need any more?" Amr Lohain, and Rabab says, the truth is, yeah, I do. Whatever you have. I don't have. All I brought was 1 million mana. Amr Lo. Rabasha says, Nish geferlich. Imatarotze, if you want, likach. Imatarotze likach kach. If you want, take. Bani elech imcha, and I'll go with you. I'll walk with you to Ludkia. Ve'atol. Damav, and I'll no problem. I'll get paid in Ludkia. Madad lo shemen b'shmona asa ribo. So Reb Osher then measured out another 180,000 mana, right? Shmona Aser Ribo, right? 10,000, so 18 times 10 is 180,000 manas, an additional 100. So he's coming back with 1.18 million manas worth of olive oil. Amru lo inichu oso aish lo sus v'lo pered v'lo gamo v'lo chomer. Beretz Yisrael, as you can imagine, how is he now going to transport all of this olive oil back to Lutkia? The Mamish hired every single 18-wheeler that there was in Eretz Yisrael. Every single horse, mule, camel, donkey in Eretz Yisrael, shalos scharo, that was rented, that was hired in order to schlep the haul. When they got to Lutkia, Yotzu Anshe Iro Lekalso, so all of the Lutkians came out, B'Shebach V'Odoya, and they made a big welcome parade. Amru Loim, and Bob says, Lo li Kalsuni, I'm not the one to be praising. Ela Lozeh Sheba'imi, Shemodad li Shemin B'Meir Ribo. Rather, the one who deserves praise is Reb Asher, who measured out for me 1,000,000 manas worth of olive oil, and not only that, not only that, I owe him Bishmona Aser Ribo another 180,000 mana l'kai meshanemar. And what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is a pasuk in Mishlei that says, Yesh misasher ve'ein kol. You have some people who put on a show. They make themselves look like they're a wealthy person, but they're not. Misroshes, and you have other people like Reb Asher, simple yid, unassuming, and yet v'hon rav, he's running quite the geschäft. Givaldig, emevin lo mi beis azvalim. We don't bring olive oil from fertilized fields, ve'atanya, and we said also not from anpikanon. So ve'atanya ein mevin anpikaton v'mevi posel. So we had said in the Mishnah that if you bring anpikaton, which whatever that is, we'll see soon, it is kosher. Don't do it, but it's kosher. But we learned in a brayso that it's posel, right? Maybe posel. Mipnei shu sarf. It's just like, it's not oil. It's just some kind of extraction from the olive, but it wouldn't be considered oil though. Amar of Yosef says of Yosef lokasha nish geferlach ha Reb Chia ha Reb Shimon berebi. It's machlokes Reb Chia and Reb Shimon berebi. Reb Chia zarakle. Reb Chia would throw it out. He would not consider it to be oil. The Reb Shimon berebi mitabel bay, and Reb Shimon berebi would dip his bread in it. He would eat it. V'simonich ashir mikamsin, and the way that you could remember who did what is that Ashirim, right? Reb Shimon berebi came from the illustrious household of Reb Yehuda Anasi, a very wealthy dynasty, and yet he mikamsin would be stingy or whatever. He had no problem eating the anpikaton. That was good enough for him. Reb Chia, on the other hand, he would throw it out. Shisha chaloshim b'shemen amor. It says by Esther Amalka that all of the girls that would have to experience Achashverosh, so they would spend a year getting ready. It's 6 months in shemen amor, more oil. My shemen amor, what is this oil? Reb Huna bar Chia Amar stachta. Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar shemen zayis levi shlish. So Reb Huna bar Chia says it's stachta, which I think is balsam oil, says Rashi. And Reb Yirmiyah bar Abba says that it is oil that has not yet reached a third of its ripeness. Tanya, we also learn in a brayso, Reb Yehuda Omer says Reb Yehuda, that what is this shemen amor? Anpikanon, it's anpikanon, shemen zayis shlevi shlish, it's olive oil that has not yet reached a third of its ripeness. Lama sachin oso, and why would they anoint with it? Why would they rub it? Shemesher saseir, because it removes the hair, uma'adin sabasar, and it makes the flesh givaldig. Ein mevin min gargrin shenoshu b'mayim. We don't bring olive oil from olives that have been soaking in water. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught shemen zayis kavu shaluk shari. Shemen, olive oil from olives that have been pickled, boiled, soaked. V'shel shmarim, or of the dregs of the olive oil. If you press those, v'shel reach rar, if they smell geferlich, lo yavi so then don't bring from these oils v'mevi pasul, and if you do, it's pasul. But Rabbi wants to know hikdisho mau shelaka olav. If you are makdish such unusable oil, will you be chayiv malkis olav mishum bal mum, like a bal mum? Given the pasul k'bal mum dami, since it's pasul, it should be like a bal mum. Or dilma ein bal mum ela k'beima, or maybe b'beima only a animal could be a bal mum teku. It's a tie. Friends, that was Daf 85, Daf Pehei of Masechta Menachos, and Daf Pehei. We learned two Mishnayos. The first one talked about growing grain from Menachos, where to grow them, how to grow them, which side of the hill they should grow on, and the plowing regimen. It's a little bit tricky, but you plow it and you plow it again. You have to plow at least twice in order to be able to use it for the base of Mikdash. I guess we could say that at least. And then we learned about the best oil for the temple. The best oil comes from Tkoya, and it makes you smart. We also talked about Usher having lots and lots of oil. Did we say that? Where was the other? The Rega Be'ever Yarden. I don't think that was Usher. But anyways, okay. But Usher seems to have at least a lot of oil, at least 1.18 million manas worth of oil, which was a very interesting story with Bob and Reb Usher. Friends, have a great, great day. Muadim l'simcha. Peace out.